Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, January 10th, and we will hear Cash for Grass, Nevada's plan for a sustainable future. For questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. And for technical help, you can also type your questions in the Q&A box, and I will do my best to answer those. For your questions for our panelists, it would be helpful if you stated who you would like to answer the question. That just helps me in the end when we're shuffling through questions. I appreciate that. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our consortium members, which again is made up of our APA chapters and divisions. So thanks to all those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members today. We're hosted by the Nevada chapter of APA. So thank you for kicking off 2025 for us in our webcast series. We appreciate you, and thanks for bringing this session. Coming up on your screen is a list of our upcoming sessions that we have. Boy, we've got a full schedule. You can register for these and all of our upcoming sessions on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Today's session is worth 1.5 CM credits and one of those sustainability and resilience credits. You can log them by heading over to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search by today's title or event number. If you don't have them, they're on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, but the session will pop up and then you'll be able to log those credits if you need them. If you're on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, and of course, a reminder of what's on tap for Friday. We record all of our sessions and we post them onto our YouTube channel. So just head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast. We'll pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notified when new sessions recordings are up and available. New this year, we have a mailing list. So you can take a picture of that QR code, or again, head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and you can sign up to receive one email a month from me that is just a reminder of sessions that are coming up and direct links to register for them. With that, I'm done with my housekeeping items. And again, if you have questions for our panelists, type them in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end during the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Marco, to kick things off.
All right. Thank you, Christine. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Marco Vallata. I'm a planning project manager with the City of Las Vegas and the Professional Development Officer with the Nevada chapter. I'm also the City of Las Vegas's Chief Sustainability Officer, and I oversaw the development of the city's 2050 master plan and its ongoing implementation. I'll introduce our other panelists in just a short little while up here, but I'd like to acknowledge it, at least to start, about the devastating wildfires that are going on in Southern California. And while our discussion today isn't going to delve into a sudden emergency like that, we will discuss some of the interrelationships and impacts that are often shared by regions, because it is similar in certain respects when it comes to things like drought. I'm sure a good number of you who are attending today have probably visited our state, and thank you for doing so, by the way. I'm sure that you've either, if you have visited or if you haven't, you probably have a specific opinion of our state, and sustainability probably isn't the first on your list. And I'm sure it's probably Las Vegas, the Strip, the fountains on the Bellagio, gambling, excess. Those are probably some of the things that that come first. Of course, that's what we're known for. Our state and our Visitors and Convention Authority built one of the nation's most successful and recognized brands and marketing campaigns. And in the years since, What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas was launched, we've drawn global attention and attracting an attraction using very specific imagery. And a lot of that imagery about gaming does get ingrained in our minds through the media, partly because some of the lore and the history of gaming in Las Vegas over time. Nevada's long been known for it because for almost a century, it was the only state that authorized it on a wide scale, and certainly got attention for things like the mafia and the lounge acts like the Rat Pack and Elvis. And then later on, the corporate efforts to clean some of that image up from Howard Hughes and William Harrod, Steve Wynn. Today, though, legalized gaming and sports betting are pretty much found everywhere nationwide, and Las Vegas does capitalize on that foundation in its marketing as part of another round of reinvention because we are constantly reinventing ourselves. Perhaps more recently, you've seen some of that reinvention. You might have paid attention to major sports events like Super Bowl 58 a year ago, Stanley Cup Finals, Formula One, UFC events, the NCAA Western Regional Basketball Tournament. Long ago, we've had showgirls and lounge acts, but today they've been replaced by big entertainers like U2, the Rolling Stones, Beatles. Taylor Swift made Allegiant Stadium an early stop on the Eras Tour, and they've all had residencies in Las Vegas, among others. Contrast a lot of this, though, with what else happens in Nevada from an economic perspective. For 160 years, mining has been and continues to be a major economic driver, not only gold, silver, and copper, but also a vast number of critical minerals like magnesium, manganese, nickel, gypsum, and lithium. And a lot of that takes place on federal lands, more of which, most of which is comprised in the state of Nevada as BLM land. 80% of the state has been under federal control. And due to our state's geography and where water resources are located, our state is one of the most urban in the country. Nearly 95% of the more than 3 million Nevadans live in the two major metro areas, and most of that's in southern Nevada. So in southern Nevada, Clark County is about the same size as New Jersey. And while there's a scattering of outlying towns, 2.3 million residents are concentrated in the Las Vegas Valley. Much of that land is unincorporated county. The city of Las Vegas itself is only got a population of 670,000, but it is the largest city in the state. But most people don't realize that that's actually not where the Las Vegas Strip is. Downtown Las Vegas, north of the Stratosphere Tower, is where modern Las Vegas began in 1905 as a railroad stop between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. The 4 miles of the Strip, where most of the mega resorts are located, is unincorporated Clark County. Those 4 miles are some of the most economically productive in the country. Resorts like the Mirage and Tropicana may come and go, as we saw them depart here over the last year. But the room count, has fluctuated and has increased with the addition of new resorts like most recently Fontainebleau and Resorts World. More than 40 million visitors come here annually, including millions from California that trek north along I-15, and hopefully in the next couple of years along some high-speed rail being built between here and LA. They stay about half a week, and while there was a drop during the pandemic, growth has continued, and it has accelerated at different times. The economic impact of tourism, mostly associated with Strip, constitutes half of Nevada's GDP, with 85 billion in total output. And of course, that translates into the gaming and sales tax revenue, and that's going to support most state and local government agencies. Most local governments in our state are limited services entities, but they are supported by a mixture of regional special purpose districts like school district, health district, regional transportation commission, and importantly, Southern Nevada Water Authority. We're also supported by private investor-owned utilities and other state agencies, such as the Governor's Office of Economic Development. But it's important to remember that there's another side of Nevada, and that's the side that I think most visitors don't see. It can sometimes be easy to forget that there's 2 million people that live here that support the local economy, that support visitors, as well as a lot of other normal day-to-day community activities. We do have the Defense Department in our backyard with Nellis and Creech Air Force Base. We're trying to diversify our economy into tech and healthcare and other industries that our other major metros are working on. But visitors also don't often see what else is going on in our region and our state, from desert areas like Red Rock Canyon, which is a conservation area to the west of Las Vegas, or Valley of Fire, which is a state park to the northwest, or northeast rather, or Mount Charleston, which is a national forest with alpine tundra and a ski resort that's a short drive away, with views of the Strip and Arizona and California in the distance. And while Las Vegas is often what comes to people's mind when discussing Nevada, the remainder of the state sometimes gets glossed over a bit. Reno and the capital of Carson City also have their own to offer, and we might be the most arid state in the nation, but in the sea of sagebrush in the Great Basin and Mojave deserts, there are also mountainous islands with alpine lakes and forests, and then jewels like Lake Tahoe. The um, the next thing that I would say that Nevada is most known for is probably the drought. And in recent years, you've probably seen or heard reports in the media about the drought impacting much of the American West, and that stark imagery of the bathtub ring around Lake Mead that goes along with it. Those low elevations in the Colorado River at Hoover Dam, juxtaposed with the pictures of the fountains at the Bellagio. And our speakers will speak to this in greater detail. The decline of the Colorado River inflows have had a dramatic impact on water resources, not just for us, but region wide. And it's something that should be paid attention to by planners. Now, this water is used for both municipal purposes and irrigation for agriculture. And, with aridification and the lack of snowpack in the Rockies over the last 25 years, it's reduce the overall storage capacities of both Lake Mead and Lake Powell, as well as other reservoirs in the Colorado River system, which are depended on by 40 million people, and the irrigation of thousands of acres of crops in each of the respective basin states. So water in the Colorado River Basin is a complex system, and it's governed by nearly a century-old compact between these basin states here: California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming. Later laws and treaties also incorporate Mexico into that water equation. So, at a very high level, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit more discussion of this later, the Colorado River has always been over appropriated based on an abnormally wet year in the early 20th century. And when the states formed the compact, there wasn't a lot of population here either. 15 million acre feet was allocated between the two basins, divided at about Glen Canyon. 7.5 million of which is going to the upper basin, and 7.5 million going to the lower basin. And then later on, 1.5 million to Mexico. Well, California has the largest share at roughly 25%, but Nevada has had the smallest, receiving only 300,000 acre feet annually. So when the drought is factored in and as lake levels have declined, the basin states have agreed to voluntary cuts and reductions. And in Nevada's case, our allocation has been cut about 30,000 acre feet. And that's going to change in the years to come. Las Vegas, however, is unique in that we're on the Colorado River, while Phoenix, Tucson, LA, and other cities that are fed by the Colorado River with aqueducts and diversion projects. Las Vegas has two intakes. The first of which came online in the 1970s, and that intake is now below the current elevation of Lake Mead. And should the lake level continue to decline, a second intake at 1,000 feet could also be lost. If those continue, Lake Mead would reach a dead pool elevation in which water would also not be able to pass Hoover Dam downstream to Arizona, California, or Mexico. So to help avoid a situation like that from happening, a few important things happened with the leadership of Southern Nevada Water Authority. One was big infrastructure. A third intake was built below Deadpool, as well as a massive low-level pumping stations linking the water infrastructure and those intakes together. And those are massive multi-billion dollar projects, um, through our region's purveyor. The second, which really began when the drought started, and arguably the cheaper and easier route in some respects, has been return flow credit and water conservation. In our case, as water is withdrawn and used, much of it's used outdoors for irrigation. 60% of that is consumed and essentially lost out of that 300,000 acre feet that's allocated to us. The remaining 40% is used indoors. And while some of that goes to air conditioning and chilling of water and things like that, anything else is returned by the sewer to a wastewater treatment plant and then released through the Las Vegas Wash back to Lake Mead. Additionally, we've had that emphasis on conservation. In the early 2000s, we saw the emergence of these so-called cash for grass programs. And that started really in earnest with this effort to reduce residential water consumption, which accounts for the vast majority of water consumption in the valley. Not the strip, not any of the resorts, but really residential land use. This effort is formally known as the Water Smart Landscapes Rebate Program, and it allows residents a per square foot rebate that is ranged in years from anywhere from $1 to a couple of dollars more than that to convert existing turf grass to drought tolerant Mojave Desert friendly landscaping. And that's been extended and expanded to other land use types, including civic and commercial. However, given the continuing drought and concern on the entire Colorado River system as a whole, more robust programs, regulations, and restrictions were introduced. With the leadership of SNWA, in 2021 and 2023, the Nevada legislature passed Assembly Bills 356 and 220, which introduced these major restrictions on turf and defined how non-functional turf would no longer be permitted in places like landscaping strips and medians and in commercial landscapes. This restriction, coupled with restrictions on new development, as well as restrictions on spray irrigation, fountains, evaporative cooling, swimming pool sizes, golf course restrictions. All of those have gone to helping reduce our overall consumptive use of Colorado River water. Now, I know you might be thinking, with this, how does this work in tandem with land use? Again, reflecting back a couple slides ago, we have most of our land in Nevada as federal land. In the 90s, though, there was an effort to help try to better manage and prepare land for development. And again, since we're one of the most urban states in the country, we have a unique feature, a unique law that kind of works hand in hand with the water conservation paradigm. The Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act actually was introduced in 1998. That's a typo there, but it allows BLM to sell public land within a boundary around the Las Vegas Valley at an auction. Revenue from those land sales can be used primarily for parks and rec projects, conservation, things like that. But some of it also goes to the state's education fund, to the Southern Nevada Water Authority for water infrastructure, and government capital improvement projects. There's also carve outs for affordable housing and multi species habitat conservation, fuel reduction and wildfire prevention, environmentally sensitive land acquisition, and then for projects in Lake Tahoe, White Pine County, and Lincoln County in eastern Nevada. Initially, there were 68,000 acres of BLM land for disposal within this boundary, and about 26,000 acres remain for disposal. However, with growth over time, we're projecting an estimated population growth of another 2.8 million people to 2.8 million people by 2035 and 3 million by 2050. So there's going to be this increased demand for both non-residential and residential land use as land has in the SNWA boundary has dwindled. However, higher densities and infill development is something that most of the cities in the county have expressed a desire for. And it just so happens that there's greater water efficiency with higher densities and higher, more intense use. So we're trying to balance that long-term growth and where people go to live um, with infill and redevelopment, which is also important for a variety of other reasons, of course. So based on current estimates, we're anticipating that auctions under the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act, or SNPLMA, can accommodate about another decade's year of average annual growth or so. But as that land availability goes down and land costs rise and certain types of use gets limited based on on certain types of development, we're trying to work on how that it's managed with economic development strategies, and that's desired by our state and our governor's office of economic development and local agencies, as well as the water supply that we have in Lake Mead, because 90% of the water that we use is drawn from there. Enter in more recently is the solution to some of that. The Southern Nevada Economic Development and Conservation Act has been introduced by Senator Catherine Cortez Masto over the last couple of years, and it hasn't made its way all the way through the Senate. But essentially, it is a regional effort that has been supported to help expand that boundary for 25,000 additional acres for disposal. Um, while at the same time conserving 2 million acres of federal land within Clark County and setting up areas of critical environmental concern. It would address things like housing, both affordable housing and the streamlining of that. It would something that has also been a byproduct of the SNPLMA land sales. It would also go towards that continued funding of parks, recreation, and open space, and the construction of critical infrastructure like police and fire protection, flood control, renewable energy transmission, and water infrastructure. So you can see that there's a little bit of a balance that has to happen as a result of that, and at the same time, water goes into that. That is something that is in alignment with many of the regional and local plans. We still want to concentrate our efforts on infill growth and development within the core of the city, and our regional plan and our respective master plans for each of the local governments do speak to this. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the underlying efforts of Southern Nevada Water Authority and how important that is to both our regional growth and economic development. As our friend from the Sphere would say, this is how we do things in our state, and it's really a unique situation that many other communities don't necessarily have to navigate through. But we do have a shared common environmental challenge that we have to go through with our peer cities across the American West in the drought. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our other panelists. First, Michael Bernardo, who is the Sustainability and Conservation Manager with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Dorian Stonebarger, who is the Deputy Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Mike.
All right. Thank you so much, Marco, and thank you for having me on this webcast today. Um, so as I share my screen here, I will just say that so I work for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. I'm going to talk to you about some of our efforts today. And what I do there is I'm the enterprise conservation manager. So I'm responsible for Southern Nevada Water Authority to hit our agency's conservation goals for the commercial, industrial, institutional, golf course, and multifamily residential communities. So that entails working with all of the resorts, the casinos, the HOAs, and that also entails one of the largest, as we mentioned, the title of this program, Cash for Grass programs in the entire United States. It's also the longest running. So our Water Smart Landscape program started in 1999. It's been going on for 25 years now. Last year, we provided about $37 million in rebates to remove turf from single-family residential homes on a voluntary basis, as well as non-functional turf throughout our community in accordance with AB 356 that Marco mentioned. And this year we're on track to hit around $50 to $60 million in the removal of non-functional turf. So we have an extremely large program, and I'll share why that is here. Okay, so bottom line is Las Vegas is the driest metropolitan city in the United States. So if you look at Phoenix, they get about twice the rainfall that we get. The United States average is about 7 times what we get. And if you look at a lot of the other areas in the Southwest, they're significantly higher. The area that's lower than us at just 2.2 inches is Death Valley, which is the driest area in the in North America. So let me give you a look back a little bit on Las Vegas in 2024. So this was released by the National Weather Service. So 2024 was tied with the first warmest year on record with 2017. But with that, we broke or tied 28 high maximum temperatures, 39 high minimum temperatures. So what that means is our hot days are getting hotter, and at night it's just not cooling off. There's been no measurable rainfall since July 14th. So that was 171 days from July 14th to December 31st. You could add 10 additional days because it hasn't rained since. So we're at probably 181 days now. This is the second most days, the second longest streak on record. The first was a little over 200 days. So we're encroaching upon that. We also saw the most days at or above 100 degrees, so in triple digits with 112. So that's 1/3 of our year we just spent in triple digits. And the most consecutive days above or at 80 degrees with 63. So again, those cooler temperatures are not warming up. Those cooler temperatures are warming up. It's just not cooling off in the low temperatures in the summertime or even in the spring and fall like it used to. We also broke 120 degrees this past year. So the highest observed temperature on record in Las Vegas previously was 117 degrees, and we hit 120 degrees this last year. So finally, I'll just add the total precipitation for this year. I mentioned the average is 4.2 inches for the last 30 years. We hit 2.2 inches, which is the average of Death Valley over the last 30 years. So here in the Mojave Desert, Las Vegas, we just got last year about the same amount of rainfall as the driest place in North America has in the last 30 years. And we need to figure out ways to preserve our most precious resource, which is water. And the biggest use of water, as Marco alluded to, is grass in our community. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, but first I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the Colorado River. So the 1,450-mile long Colorado River is the 6th largest river in the US and quite possibly the hardest working river in the world. It brings life to the hottest and driest parts of the country, powering the Southwest and feeding our nation. Its waters are sucked into thirsty grounds, while half of its entire flow is pumped to cities and farms outside of its basin, never to return. Climate change and overallocation have caused every drop to be depleted along its journey, making it the largest river in the US that no longer reaches the ocean. So this is the underdog story of the Colorado River, and certainly we want to talk about how that came to be. So Marco alluded to the Colorado River Compact. He discussed the upper and lower basin apportionments. So basically it serves 40 million people. Upper and lower basin get 7.5 million acre feet each allocated each year. So that's 15 million acre feet. Mexico gets another 1.5 million feet. That's 16.5 million total. If you look at the long view records of Colorado River's actual flow from 1906 until 2023. That number is closer to 14.7 million acre feet. And if you look at the last 20 or so years, you're looking at somewhere between 12.5 and 13 million acre feet of actual natural flow in the river. So when you allocate 16.5 million acre feet each year, but your long-term average is only 14.8 million acre feet, and the last 20 years of drought have only been around 12.5 to 13 million acre feet, that imbalance is a debit out of your checking account essentially. And our bank account is Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And that's why you see every single year those reservoirs paying out that deficit with their waters and their reservoir elevations declining. So here's where the water goes for the 7 basin states in Mexico. And you'll see that at the very top of the water drop on the right-hand side is Nevada. So out of the total 16.8 million acre feet of allocation each year for the Colorado River, Nevada gets just 1.8% of that. So we have the smallest share at just 300,000 acre feet. So, we have the most work to do to preserve that share to ensure that we can continue to grow and develop economically, given what Las Vegas has become in the last 20, 30 years. So who we are at SNWA, we were formed in 1991 to address the Southern Nevada's unique water needs on a regional basis. So previous to SNWA, who manages infrastructure and negotiations on the Colorado River and ensures that we have an adequate water supply for the future of Las Vegas, you would have our member agencies such as Boulder City, Henderson, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, essentially competing for that water to ensure or develop quick enough that they can use that water before the other city develops that water supply, right? So that was first in time, first in line water rights doctrine. Nevada has 300,000 acre feet allocation. Who's going to get it? So in 1991, Southern Nevada Water Authority was developed to say, okay, we're going to plan for this water supply, and we're going to allow all member agencies to continue to develop. And we're going to plan for Colorado River policy. We're going to develop the infrastructure to ensure that you have a reliable and resilient supply. We're going to do all the water quality testing for you all to ensure that we're delivering you high quality water. And we're going to do, a 50-year planning horizon to ensure that we always have the future in mind. And we've been doing that. And our major responsibilities, as I mentioned, water supply planning, conservation, water quality, infrastructure, and stewardship. So conservation is always going to be our first, second, and third best option to save water. There's a lot of discussion on, bringing water from the Missouri River or desalination in the Pacific Ocean. One of the concerns with that is certainly cost. There's capital costs, there's permitting, there's political infeasibility and political resistance against that. And ultimately, conservation is something that we can do today as a community, all of us at any time. So Southern Nevada water use, 90% comes from the Colorado River, so Lake Mead right in our backyard, and 10% comes from groundwater supplies. So the casinos and a lot of areas around the valley, we do have a underground aquifer, and we do use some of that to supplement our supplies here in Las Vegas. So in severe and sustained drought continue to impact the storage reservoirs here. So in 1983, Colorado River Basin was spilling. It was the first uncontrolled release and only uncontrolled release on record, where most of the Bureau of Reclamation's dams on the Colorado River were spilling. And then in 2003, 20 years later, that was really the beginning of the drought. 2000, officially, we say it started. But we went from about 100% full in 1983 to around 50% full in 2003. And by 2023, that figure represents around 25 to 30% full. But Southern Nevada has spent decades to ensure the reliability of the water supplies within our community. So we've done that through construction of infrastructure, through resource planning, through water banking, and certainly through extremely large investment in conservation. So Marco mentioned the infrastructure, which I'll go into, but that low lake level pumping station that's able to pull water below dead pool is really what makes us the most secure location in the southwestern United States. So dead pool is an elevation when water can no longer pass through Hoover Dam. So dead pool at Lake Mead is elevation 895 feet. And at that level, if Lake Mead were to decline below that, water could no longer pass through Hoover Dam to go to users in California, Arizona, or Mexico. Our third intake goes down to 875 feet. So if our Basin State partners were in Mexico were unable to get their water downstream, our community still has about 20 feet of elevation that we could pull water from. Resource planning, we have a 50-year water resource plan. So every year we look out 50 years on the horizon. We take into account what industries are here. We take into account what population growth will look like. And we also look at climatology and hydrology on the Colorado River Basin. And we plan, as I mentioned, we've seen over the last 20 years a 12.5 to 13 million acre foot natural flow of the river. We're currently planning for a 11 million acre foot river and a 10 million acre foot river in the future in different planning scenarios to ensure that if the river continues to decline, if aridification continues at the rate we've seen, we're able to continue to live within our means of what we have here in our community. So a lot of folks, as Marco also alluded to, Clark County being the size of New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. That was the first time I heard that. So thanks, Marco. I'm going to use that in the future. But Southern Nevada, or Clark County specifically, holds 70% of the state's population and provides 70% of the state's economic output while using less than 5% of the water available in the state for use. And here's where a lot of folks think, well, it's the casinos. The casinos are using a lot of the water. This Southern Nevada resorts employ 22% of the entire state's workforce and use less than 1/10 of 1% of the water available in Nevada. And that's because of that consumptive versus non-consumptive use. So as Marco mentioned, we're able to recycle 99% of all indoor use that goes to down the drain. And excuse me, I'll go to this water system infrastructure graphic. So when the water goes down the drain, it goes to one of 4 water treatment facilities. Those treat the water to near drinking water quality, releases it into the Las Vegas Wash, which is a large urban river. That river creates some habitat, gets naturally filtered, and enters into Lake Mead. And every gallon we're able to put from that treated wastewater into Lake Mead gets accounted for, and that's a gallon that we could divert out of Lake Mead without any impact to that 300,000 acre foot entitlement that we get for the Colorado River each year. So it's basically just an exchange. It's a return flow credit. We put a gallon back, we take a gallon out. The net change to Lake Mead is 0. So we're able to do that. So the secret sauce, so to speak, to our community is the ability to reduce outdoor water use, the water use on grass and pools and landscaping, evaporative cooling, septic tanks, water use that gets lost from our system, and bring that water indoors to be recycled so that we can get return flow credits for that. And then here's a graphic of what that low lake level pumping station looks like below dead pool. And here is the cycle of what our indoor use looks like. So again, the biggest use of consumptive use of our water that leaves our system is outdoor water use. Again, grass, pools, landscaping. The second largest consumptive use is cooling towers. So anytime you have a really large resort, those mega resorts use extremely large cooling towers for their HVAC to keep the climate inside the building cool. They pass water over and they use the phase change from water evaporating and that dry bulb, wet bulb differential temperature, because we're very dry out here, low relative humidity. and the difference between your dry bulb and wet bulb temperature could be about 30 degrees. So that evaporation cooling effect is how they're able to cool and remove heat from their cooling systems. So it's extremely efficient out here, but also it evaporates a ton of water. And then finally, septic systems. So right now, if you have a septic system, you may be on well or you may be on city water. But if it goes into the septic system, the water will end up going into a leach field and ending up in the ground, and it won't get back into our cycle. So some of our conservation efforts, which again, Marco did a really great job going over, so I won't go into too much detail, but we look at regulations, incentive programs, pricing, so tiered water rates, excessive use charges, things like that, and education. So I have a team of about 30 or so people under me in enterprise conservation. There's another team of about 30 or so in single family residential conservation. And then there's a team of about 15 to 20 in water use compliance, which is also known as the water patrol. So they're the ones looking around for water waste, water theft from fire hydrants, water running off properties, things like that. So in total, SNWA's conservation groups total about 80 employees that we're able to do. But in addition to enforcement, one of our main drives is education of our public on why we do this and why it's so important. So we mentioned outdoor water use with grass. So in 2015, water use began increasing despite ongoing conservation programs. As I mentioned, Cash for Grass program started around 1999. We also have innovative technologies programs where we will provide incentives or rebates to different technologies. A lot of times it's cooling tower controllers or central plant um, controllers that will make their central plant operate more efficient and use less water. But we've seen in 2015 certainly the water use for consumptive use. Now, this isn't the indoor water use. This is the amount that we're losing from our system each year towards that 300,000 acre foot entitlement going up on a steady trend. So in 2021, we set a new conservation goal of 86 gallons per capita per day. And some initiatives we were able to pass to do that was non-functional grass AB 356. That's a state mandated prohibition on non-functional grass by 2027 that Marco mentioned. Septic tanks, so municipal water supplies. If you're on city water, you can no longer have a septic tank. You have to connect to for new connections. So if you have a new connection that you want city water, but you're too far away from the city and from the sewer, and as a developer, you don't want to connect to the sewer, it's cheaper to have a septic tank. You can no longer have that. You have to pay the extra cost to bring it back to the sewer so that we can get return flow credit for that. Evaporative cooling, this was a really big one. This was passed and recently started in August of 2023. If you are a new development, you can no longer have swamp coolers or cooling towers. You have to develop with an air-cooled chiller, ground source heat pump, thermal energy storage. There's a lot of different technologies out there, but essentially it's a much it's a technology that does not use water, and you're prohibited from using evaporative cooling in new development here. Swimming pools are now limited to 600 square feet, so about 20 by 30. What we saw was that when we eliminated the non-functional grass and when we didn't allow new grass to be planted in backyards of single-family residential homes, we saw poolscapes throughout the entire backyards of these homes. So we were seeing 3,000 and 4,000 square foot pools that were covering the entire backyards, and they were counterproductive to the removing grass from the backyard. So swimming pools are now limited to 600 square feet. New grass installations are limited to park, schools, and cemeteries only, places where they'll have the most public benefit. Golf courses, so no new golf courses are allowed to open in the valley, and the golf course water budgets were reduced by a third from 6.2 acre feet per irrigated acre to 4 acre feet per irrigated acre. No new ornamental fountains or water features. They're all prohibited, even at resorts. So the Bellagio fountains, as an example, that is well water for the Bellagio's well water rights. So that is off of our Colorado River supply. But if a new resort came and they wanted to copy the Bellagio, even if they were on a well, they would not be able to do that under the current prohibition that we have. And then water pricing. So we have punitive water rates called the excessive use charge for the top 10% of single family residential users. So the top 10% of users of water in single family residential community uses more than the bottom 60% combined. So when we put that together and do the analysis, like it's a stark contrast of what is acceptable in this community to allow our community to continue to thrive and live within the water supply that we have. So what we've seen is when everybody contributes to conservation and we see all of these programs, we see the results. So you saw that increasing trend in the previous slide. And then now you see since 2021, we've seen years of record-breaking significant conservation and use. The consumptive use in 2023 was the lowest it has been since 1990 when SNWA was formed. So it's a huge accomplishment. And the reason why is Southern Nevada has, since 2002, has grown in population by 52%. Our per capita use has declined by 58%, and the total Colorado River water consumption has decreased by 42%, despite adding nearly 1 million people in population. And then finally, I'll just share that for future development, we recognize that limiting outdoor water use was addressing, the loss from our system or to our community on, grass that's ornamental in center medians, in between the road and the sidewalk, things like that. We realize that removing evaporative cooling will reduce the footprint, the water footprint, certainly for new developments and warehouses. But who's to say that silicone chip manufacturer isn't going to move here, or a large commercial foundry isn't going to move here and try to use a bunch of our community's water resources and essentially negate all of the work that we've done. So we've worked with our economic development officials here in the community, as well as our governor's Office of Economic Development. And we put together a kind of an advisory tool right now called the Water Investment Rating Tool. So all new development, we look at different water resource factors, and then we score them. So we look at if they're recommended, if they're not recommended, or if we need to look at what are the social and economic impacts to our community by having this business here. They get a score, and then it comes to a final decision. So this is still an advisory tool. When we look at what a business entails for this, we look at how much water they consumptively use and how much water they return into our sewer that gets recycled, and we take that ratio. And then for economic and societal factors, we look at the number of jobs, their average hourly wage, and their estimated tax revenue and things like that. So with that, that's where kind of we are with SNWA and all the things our community has done to preserve our water resources for the future. Thank you.
All right, and we'll now turn things over to Dorian with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Dorian.
Thanks, Marco, and thanks, Mike. Let me make sure that I am sharing the right screen. Should be. Oh, I want to tell you, Mike, your water drop visual is always the most eye-opening to me, the one that tells you where the water is going, but maybe that's just me. Again, my name is Dorian Stonebarger. I'm with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, so a state agency, also known as GOED. As a state representative, I also want to thank you, Marco, for acknowledging the fires and offer if there, I know a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes, but if there is anything that hasn't been offered or deployed yet that we need to talk about, please do not hesitate to let us know. But as a statewide agency, we are focused on economic, workforce, and community development. There's been a lot of different state models for economic development in Nevada since even the 1960s. And I know that a lot of states have changed their statewide models for economic development, sometimes even prioritizing. But our current version was born out of the Great Recession. We needed to do a better job at diversifying our tax base beyond gaming and hospitality. It is the last industry to recover from a downturn, and it was realized again as Southern Nevada recovered very poorly from the pandemic. Oh, there we go. Our mission is to ensure high-wage jobs for Nevadans. Our vision is a vibrant, innovative, and sustainable economy. Now, while a sustainable economy means your tax base and your ability to generate tax revenue, as well as optimal employment levels, we do take conservation and environmental sustainability very seriously here in Nevada, as was evidenced from both our municipal and utility partners' presentations. And I will try not to repeat anything that they said, but it's hard because we do truly work together in this effort. And that highlights one of the most important factors of today's presentation, I believe, that partnerships between state and local government, industry, and the community towards any effort, but especially with conservation, is of key importance. And I did just learn today that the APA takes sustainability very seriously. It's very cool that you guys offer the sustainability credits for individuals listening to stuff like this. I appreciate that. So having development in the title doesn't just imply, but it solidifies a growth mindset. But that's not intended to bypass or ignore our resource constraints. We don't just approach businesses and say, come on in, the water's fine. It's a little bit more in Las Vegas, like, come on in, we planned for you. And that's because people are coming, regardless of if we do anything or not. So we're expecting, it's projected, that we will have over 3 million residents in just Southern Nevada alone. And if you remember, Marco had said that's the residency of our entire state at this moment. And so we're quickly growing, does slow down a little bit. We're looking at the population expected to reach just under 3.5 million by 2060. But we need to ensure that those residents, both old and new, are able to thrive and have access to sustainable high-wage jobs. And that requires business growth and attraction. So how do we promote growth and sustainability? That's what we're talking about today, at the same time from an economic development perspective. Well, in addition to the rating tool, that is an advisory tool that Mike just mentioned that we do use from SNWA, we make natural resources and natural resource technologies one of our target industries. That's followed by advanced manufacturing, hospitality and sports, creative industry, transportation and logistics, and information technology. Now, you can see at the face that none of these are high water users. However, the devil's in the details. And that's why the rating tool was something that was important for our water authority to create. You can also tell that these overlap a little bit, or at least complement each other. And they also complement our strengths. You might be wondering why hospitality would be on the list when I mentioned earlier that our charge is to diversify beyond that industry. Well, it's a strength and we can't dismiss that. And so instead, we want to support the ancillary activities that support it. You might also be wondering if it's working. It is, to some degree, but it's a work in progress. I had mentioned earlier that Southern Nevada was slow to recover from the pandemic, and that's because Northern Nevada, they recovered 4 times faster. Northern Nevada had started to diversify into tech jobs and advanced manufacturing. I think that was mentioned earlier, right after the Great Recession, and that has proven to be very successful. And admittedly, a lot of those companies are transplants from California. We have a very low tax base here in Nevada that is attractive for businesses, and it is definitely attractive for smaller startup tech companies. However, Southern Nevada has also seen significant strides in other sectors. The healthcare sector being an industry that is rapidly growing, it is one of our faster employment sectors growing at the moment. But at the same time, we also welcomed the Raiders. And then we approved the Oakland A's, the Las Vegas A's. We hosted the Super Bowl, and we just wrapped up our second Formula One race. So meaning at the same time that we are making advancements in other industries, we are doubling down on entertainment and hospitality. So it's not changing as quickly as maybe to be expected, or all of the effort that's going into it. In addition to hospitality being one of our strengths, we do have strengths in some of our other natural resources. We are an amazing state for clean energy, from solar to geothermal to the largest lithium deposits in North America, which is of course used for batteries and energy storage. Most of us are connected by a lithium battery right now as we speak. But just like a job interview, some of these strengths are also weaknesses. Water is not our only resource constraint. So although we absolutely have the ability to produce clean energy, not at the rate that it's currently being used. And I wanted to recognize this even in this water conversation, because I know many other states are facing the same thing right now. May not be water that's your constraint, but there's a lot of pressure to keep producing more and more energy. And that's due to the advancements in technology and the need for data centers to support those efforts. It is requiring more out of all of us than we've ever had before. And what do data centers need in addition to energy? They need to cool themselves. And what's typically used for cooling? Water. And when you're in a state that limits water use for cooling, what's the alternative? Typically more energy. But thankfully, there were those alternatives that Mike mentioned that we provide the opportunity to explore, and they provide the support and sort of education on that for data centers. In addition, we have the land constraints that Marco mentioned, the 80% of our land being federally owned. It's the highest in the nation. And yes, we do have the process for the lands bill to go after land for more economic development and affordable housing. We too, as a state, are recognizing the need to work with local governments to figure out how to incentivize infill and redevelopment. It wasn't until I worked here in economic development that I found out most economic development agencies do not consider redevelopment as economic development, or at least they keep them separate and in their agency. And we need to have better conversations around that. So one of our partners actually is part of our, a factor of our metropolitan planning organization recently conducted a study that identified over 80,000 acres of underutilized land in Southern Nevada. The study didn't even include vacant buildings or government-owned properties, so clearly we have some opportunity there. I think probably most of you are wondering, based on all of the presentation leading up to that, is this preventing, limiting, or deterring development? And yes, at times, but mainly because of the time that it takes to get infrastructure to available properties. And that tends to be more so in the case of industrial development. So industrial developments tend to be zoned in more remote areas. Zoning matters, as you all know. And we don't have currently infrastructure that's leading into those spaces. And so that's another important conversation around the infill and redevelopment, not just for the industrial use, but the quality and the connectivity that can happen when you are supporting those efforts. However, the stricter water policies alone, not necessarily. We don't know what companies aren't looking at Nevada just because of the fear of us running out of water. It is definitely a perception that's out there. But we have been working through innovative solutions. We do have partners like the SNWA with the ability to incentivize the utilization of new technologies, and that's actually a selling point. As a state agency, GOED, we do have the opportunity to also help sponsor some of those innovations, and we have been doing so. A couple exciting projects that I'm going to talk to you about, and then I'm going to wrap it up because I see that we're over our hour mark and we want to allow time for questions. But Governor's Office of Economic Development in 2013 started a nonprofit called WaterStart. WaterStart provides a testbed for new solutions to water technologies. Since inception, WaterStart has funded 49 pilot projects evaluated 450 technologies, and their corporate partners have invested 4.5 million into new solutions. We also worked with WaterStart and SRI to develop a water-wise economic development framework, more recommendations, but you will see some of those recommendations present in our next legislative session, which starts next month. And then more recently, we've been able to support one of the first regional National Science Foundation engines. This is the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine, also known as SWISI. We love acronyms. It's led by Arizona State, but it spans Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. So 3 of the states that are in that compact. It aims to commercialize sustainable innovations related to water, renewable energy, and net carbon emissions. So a lot more conservation efforts going on there. And so we will continue to work towards innovations to help support our entities at remaining the best in the nation for water conservation. We have done an incredible amount of work, and we will continue to support those efforts. Also helps us support our efforts because, again, 3 million are coming, and we are living in a desert, and we acknowledge that. So again, we plan for it. Come on in, the water's fine.
Thanks, Dorian. I really appreciate it. And thank you also, Michael. Before we ask Christine about some questions that have been coming in through the chat, and if you have any, please, that you'd like to ask any of us, please drop them in the chat box, and Christine will call them out to us here. I have a few that I just wanted to throw out to Dorian and Michael just to get us started. So given some of the recent developments with respect to negotiating the Colorado River Compact and the allocations on the river, Michael, what is the outlook right now, and what's changed perhaps post-election?
Sure. So, with the change of administration, it's always uncertain. I spent 12 years as a Fed with the Bureau of Reclamation on the federal team. So it's always uncertain because you don't know yet who your political team's going to be, what their major vision's going to look like for, like, the Commissioner of Reclamation, Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, or the Secretary of the Interior, which Secretary of the Interior is the water master for the lower basin of the Colorado River. So those are critical positions, right? But what I've seen through the first transition with the Trump office administration, and then the transition from Trump to Biden, and before that with President Obama, water is one of those things that gets bipartisan support. Now, some aspects of climate change and why there isn't enough water may be contested, but the bottom line is the amount of water that isn't there and the amount of water that's needed is always something people are going to rally around and do the right thing around. So I think, in terms of the change of administration, things will pretty much stay the course. And also the Basin states have 100-year proven track record of doing what's necessary to preserve the river, right? The law of the river started with the Colorado River Compact in 1922. And then the Boulder Canyon Project Act of 1928 authorized the Hoover Dam and the construction of the All-American Canal. 1944 U.S.-Mexico Treaty, Colorado River Basin Project Act that authorized the construction of the CAP, and all of the Supreme Court decrees and agreements that have happened in between have built the basis of how that river operates today. And all of those things came during challenging times. Now, everything seems to be coming to a head right now with, right, ensuring that tribes get the appropriate recognition and they're at the table, and they can see some of their undeveloped water rights come to fruition, or what to do with those water rights if they still have them but they haven't developed. But ensuring that it's not just the Basin states, it's the tribes, and it's all parties discussing this. And that's really the Fed's hand in the negotiations aside from the water master. It's to facilitate those conversations so that we come to an agreement that everyone can live with. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but I think you're going to see people rally around doing the right thing, and in the Basin states, again, will come together to do what's right for all the 40 million people that rely on the water.
All right. Dorian, when approaching new companies to attract them to Nevada, what's been the reaction to the drought itself?
I guess I should unmute myself to answer every question. There is a little bit of fear. It's definitely out there, right? It has made it into several news articles. It is known. However, as mentioned, those industries that we're targeting, they tend to, at the face, not be very high water users anyways. If we are to a place where a company is considering moving to Nevada, they are connected to our utilities almost immediately, because we need to know if they have the ability to get water, if they have the ability to get power, and what their other infrastructure needs are. So it's determined very early on if there's ways that, say, the water authority can work with them with some of those innovations that will get them across the finish line. But I'll just reiterate that some of our challenges are more the time that it's going to take to get the infrastructure rather than the infrastructure itself.
Thank you. Christine, if you have a question from the chat box, we'll take one of those now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have quite a few here, so I'm just kind of filtering through them. The first one, I guess I had already let Michael and Dorian know about it, and I don't think the Las Vegas area really applies to this, but 75% of water goes to farming. So what is being done to reduce water consumption? What are other states that use the Colorado River doing to conserve water? And is there a chance to bring water from northern Nevada down to Las Vegas? So we've got a lot of questions to kind of unpack in here. So first, does anyone have any comments about farming and the water consumption and ways to reduce it, if that's possible?
Yeah, if I can jump in really quickly. So when I shared that slide with the different entitlements of where the water goes, the reason was when the water was established, it was based on irrigable acreage back in the time, right? Farming was the predominant source of where that water went to. So Las Vegas and Southern Nevada received the smallest allocation because we had no farming. So for the 75% of the Colorado River water does go to farming, it's in other states. It's not in Nevada. So there's always ways that those states could look to more efficient farming mechanisms, things like that. And certainly they have been. So that's one way that they've been conserving. So I'll stop with that and see if anybody else wants to answer the other question.
Not on the water piece, but I do want to add that that's also what happened with land. When Nevada first started, you could still, if you were going to farm, you could still graze on federal property and you could still mine on federal property. And so there wasn't a huge push to reduce federally owned land. And now we weren't expected to be in the middle of the desert as big as we are.
Yeah, the Southern Nevada, I mean, there's limited agriculture. There's a few valleys that have, smaller groundwater rights fed off of tributaries to the Colorado River, but not directly off the river itself. Really kind of limited in that respect. Same with ranching, although there are some ranches around Southern Nevada. Northern and central Nevada is where you find the bulk of Nevada's agriculture. The Newlands Reclamation Project outside of Reno, where the Truckee River, is diverted to Fallon and Fernley. That's really kind of where some of the bulk of that agriculture is in that part of the state. The Carson River, kind of the same thing, through the Carson and Eagle Valley. Humboldt River, same thing in the northern stretch. There is, the vast majority of the other basins in the state are using groundwater rights. There's just not a lot of surface water to begin with. There's some of that. There's some of that runoff that comes off of the mountains, but they're really just ephemeral streams and really uh, small rivers. And I don't think there's a huge push to do any intrastate groundwater pumping projects to take water from one part of the state to another part of the state. Uh, there's 430 miles between Las Vegas and Reno, and I can tell you it would be very challenging from just an engineering perspective alone, just to do any of that. Um, so yeah, I'll leave it there.
Great. Next one, this one, Michael, if you could kick it off. What is your definition of non-functional turf and what specific limitations do you have on it? The question says, I work in Colorado and we're working on aligning our local code with the new bill that passed in 24 that limits non-functional turf. But of course, we're finding that people are finding the loopholes and we want it to make it more resilient. So thoughts on that? I think you might have sent me a link. I don't know if that
Sure.
link is part of the definition or
Yep. So, what Southern Nevada Water Authority did when AB 356 was passed, we put together a citizens committee to essentially define and provide our handbook on what non-functional turf is. So I sent that to Christine. Thank you for putting it in the chat. But that is basically our guidebook, and that's how we define it. That's how we apply it. And our basically, it's if the only person that's enjoying or walking on the turf is the person that's mowing it and maintaining it, then it's non-functional, right? We want to see grass in areas where kids can play soccer, where families can have a picnic, where you can enjoy it, not for pet waste, not for aesthetics. All of those things are considered non-functional. So center medians, entryway turf into like an HOA, like a where it's surrounded by roadways and there's no reasonable way to access it safely. Um, Areas on high slopes of 25% or more that can't be irrigated efficiently. You water it and it just all runs down into the street. That's all non-functional.
Yeah, when we were, I worked on the ordinance that was based on that link there and those definitions, and so we, along with the county and the other cities in Southern Nevada, incorporated that into our municipal code and our zoning code, uh, again to try to be uniform across the region. We had I think the approach is, define what it is and then leave out some of the, what it's not. So there's a little bit of a mix with that, but yeah, hitting the specific dimensions and hitting the slope and what is it being used for, athletic fields and things like that. Those are clearly functional. The civic cases where you have parks and stuff like that, clearly functional. But on that entryway where if you're running out lawnmower over it, not so.
um real quick before we get to our next question, there was kind of another question that I want to kind of poke in here. Cemeteries, permitted use of grass. Are there non-grass cemeteries that you see that are good examples of using like local flora or I don't know, anything but grass?
There are some cemeteries in Southern Nevada that do not use that do not use grass. They're probably your old Westy cemeteries,
The
and with
tumbleweeds
with
going
the
through.
tumbleweeds.
Yeah.
In Virginia City, the Comstock National Historic District. There's a little bit different. I mean, different climate, different geography. It's up in the mountains, but they've done a lot of adaptive use on that. The Civil War Cemetery in Reno, there's been a lot of attention and care to that. That doesn't have grass on it. Um, Again, different scenarios, but there are examples out there around the state where some of the what's native is there, and with maybe some limited care to try to help make it attractive.
Thank you. And folks, let me know in the chat if you're interested in a session on cemeteries and cemetery planning and all of that. I'm curious because we actually have a division that handles, that talks about that kind of stuff. And I could ask them to do a webinar on that. All right, next question. Are any jurisdictions doing anything to make it easier to plan and install ground source heat pumps, given that they're an energy efficient and can avoid consumptive use of water?
Yeah, so if I could jump in on this, Marco. So for new development, there's a federal tax credit for it, right? And it's up to 40% if you're in an energy market. It's 30% for the ground source heat pump, 10% for an energy market. There's also some other qualifiers that you can get. So really great federal incentives on new development right now. It also applies to remodels or conversions, but SNWA offers out a rebate if you go from evaporative cooling to dry cooling. So ground source heat pump would count. We give $1,500 per ton converted. So that's on top of and stacks with any federal rebates you get. And then there's also for existing only, because it's not subject to the moratorium you're grandfathered in. If you go from wet or evaporative cooling, like a cooling tower, to an adiabatic cooler, that's a hybrid system. So that's something that can operate in a air cooled or dry mode without evaporating any water and still cool your building. But then if the ambient temperature gets too high, where the energy use goes too high, it'll start wetting media material to start creating an evaporative effect, or spray the coils. So those we provide $1,025 per ton converted.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about this in the question, one of the questions that Marco presented, and I want to dive a little deeper here. What strategies have you found that were most successful at communicating your message and the urgency of water conservation to electeds? Dorian.
I was waiting for Mike to answer, considering it's mostly them who are doing the communication. Even if we're not talking about electeds, everybody in Nevada knows not to water on Sundays. Like, it's drilled into your heads, all of the effort. So I'd actually say this more from my previous role than in the one that I am currently, because I worked for an elected official. The Water Authority has been very good at presenting exactly what they just did, is, hey, this was getting scary. This is what we're doing to offset what was looking very scary. But this is also because I did see another question of how can we continue to say that we're going to grow. Well, when you're having a conversation with an elected official, you also have to have the conversations of, if we stop all growth, then we also stop wage growth. We prevent any other home ownership. You're just done if you're not doing anything else. And so that stagnation and then that decline is scarier to an elected official who is also wanting to create good lives for their residents and their communities. And so you understand that there are these measures, and yes, they seem aggressive to those who have already been living here and some of the businesses that have already existed. It's not that for those that are coming in new, it's just how it is. And these are the measures that we need to take if we want to continue to live in this small desert town.
Yeah, I'd also say that, SNWA has done a pretty good job at getting the message across. There are property owners that, given our setup here, how SNWA being a regional member made up of representatives from different entities, it's a little bit different given that we have property owners going straight to the cities or the county and asking like, why are my water rates so high? And then having to explain that, from an elected official down to the constituents that they're serving. Um, but SNWA over its history, has done a pretty good job with their outreach and their educational campaign. One of the ones that I think caught on, early on was, it's a desert out there, be water smart, and that has been something that I think continues on. Having transitioning into a sports town, having the Golden Knights as an expansion NHL franchise, we had some players do some TV spots that I think were pretty, they're pretty well received. Ryan Reeves, one of the Golden Knights players, checking somebody because they were watering their sidewalk and not following the watering schedule as required. I mean, doing stuff like that, helps, you know, get the point out, and I think at a larger level, it helps with the, you know, when you hear it over and over and over, just like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, it gets ingrained. And I think there's more recognition. Yeah, we need to be conserving water and let's follow it. And I think, um, I'll leave to Michael to, kind of expand on that if he wants to.
Yeah, if I could just maybe put a fine point on two things. So one, Lake Mead's in our backyard, right? So although we have the smallest entitlement to Lake Mead, it is a stark reminder with that bathtub ring about where it was, the high water line, and where it is now. So it's down about 150, 160 feet from 1983, right? So it's now at about 1060. Deadpool's at 895. So we see that. Anybody who visits Las Vegas and goes out to Lake Mead sees that. So that's always I think, the easiest marketing tool because it's our scarlet letter. Um, and then the other thing I just want to mention, Marco mentioned high water rates. That's only if you get the excessive use charge, I would say, because we have tiered water rates, 4 or 5 tiers in the water rates, and our water is, in terms of utilities, is probably one of the cheapest utilities, and we need to actually. It's one of the reasons we did the tiered rates. The more you use, the more that water should increase in value, but also we don't want to disproportionately impact the homes that are maybe on fixed incomes or smaller families not using very much, right? We want to target and change the behavior of the homes that are irrigating just lush landscapes and palm trees and grass and pools and just making their backyard a desert oasis. That's fine if they're going to do that, but they're going to pay for it. And after you get to the highest tier, the excessive use charge is $8 or $9 per 1,000 gallons of water you use. So it could add up very quickly. And it has worked. We've seen folks, when we started last year with the excessive use rate, go from $4,500 bills. We go out there, we do a site audit, educational visit, and we've helped them get down to like $2,000 or $1,800. So just in being more efficient, we can't change the nature of how large their property is or how much grass, pool, or landscape they have, but we could help them water only the necessary amounts and maybe find some leaks and things like that.
I'll also say, there's again that nexus between water, land use, housing, transportation. I mean, going back to that, the property size, the density. There's more water consumption that's occurring at single family houses at 5 dwelling units or an acre or less, and certainly you're way more efficient. When you're at 8, 10, 12, up to 25 plus dwelling units per acre, and then above that. But at a certain point, our zoning that we've crafted for, especially for transit oriented development, limits height to human scale, because at a certain point you're going to have, if you go too big, you're going to have a need for, or you would have had a need for, a chiller or a large mechanical equipment. Obviously we have a moratorium on that now, but the thought was, keeping it at a human scale, you're incredibly water efficient. big skyscraper, a big multifamily development like that, you're basically using way more water, kind of at the suburban single family rates.
Um, Last question, and we're going back to something that Dorian hit on with a question that she saw come in regarding the relationship between a water shortage and growth. And what I would love to see is a curve of here's how bad the water situation is compared to the growth, and at what point do we hit the max? And even if our communities aren't built out and there's still opportunities for us to grow, at what point do we have to stop? Like, is there a number where it's on the wall somewhere and you're like, oh man, we're getting closer to that point where we can't do that anymore? Or are we already starting to look at, the infill redevelopment opportunities, um, and perhaps that doesn't create such a large impact as new development?
So with all the development codes, water use is brought indoors now. So that infill development, it's not going to have grass unless it's a school park or cemetery. It's not going to have evaporative cooling, right? If it's a new residential development, it has to have a water sense irrigation clock. So that's a smart clock that won't water in the rain. So all of those things by nature bring use very little outdoor water and bring water use inside. And all of that water, our secret sauce is the ability to have those return flow credits. So all of that water that's being used through the, infill, if we're using that, 90% of that water indoors, then your consumptive use, what actually hits our allocation, is extremely small. So I put a link to the water resource plan. Thanks for sharing that. That looks out 50 years. And right now we don't have a hard wall because we know that as we continue to grow, we continue to look at meeting our conservation goals, gallons per capita per day. 86 is the number that we aim to hit. And if we hit that number, we can continue growing for the next 50 years without worrying about not having enough water for that population. Again, because we're bringing that water use inside and we are recycling that water. So although it's not as if we just have that 300,000 acre feet and that's it, we can continue to reuse that 300,000 acre feet and return it to Lake Mead and use 700,000 acre feet as long as we don't consumptively use 300,000 acre feet or more. And so that's our protection and shortage as well.
Okay. It is 2:30 Eastern time. So it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you for this great conversation. This was wonderful. And thank you to the Nevada chapter for hosting, and to our panelists. Don't forget to visit our website and register for our upcoming sessions, ohioplanning.org/planning webcast. And if you need those AICP CM credits, don't forget to log them. Everyone have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk next time. Thanks, everybody.